This is going to be kind of a combination pattern in a way. It's still going to be an emerger, and I'm going to make it a loop wing emerger out of CDC, but I'm going to use some beaver for the shuck. It's got these nice brown tips. Now, frankly, we could certainly use Antron on this, and lots of folks do some orange Antron. I'll do this later with a sparkle done. Brown is good, olive is good. Here's a little sparse bit of olive. We could combine some of those things also. But what I'm going to do is just come in with this bit of beaver and just cut a very small amount away from the skin like this, which of course turns into a lot. I've got a few guard hairs in there, which I'm going to leave, and then there's this little bit of brown that'll just turn into almost nothing. We're going to make this a short body again because the length of our hook shank and adding in this little shuck coming off the back. Now I'm going to cut my guard hairs so they're still in there like that, but leave that fluffy stuff coming out the back. Now we have some great dubbing right here that would work fine. It's probably a little bit of the wrong color maybe. It's a little on the tan, gray, creamy side, but I don't know that I mind that so much. One of the things we can always do with material like this, I'm just blending this up and getting rid of the rest of the guard hairs, the pieces that are in there. But one of the things we could do is combine this with something else. We want to give it a little bit of a more of a brownish, rusty look. Well, I have some brown olive synthetic that I can put in with it like this. Also, thread color will influence the color on a pattern like this quite a bit. Is that enough? Changes the color some. Let's put just a little bit more in there with it. And I think when these nymphs are emerging into adults and they're in this emerger stage, the back portion of the fly here can be fairly dark. A lot of it, though, is about the tying technique, and even more of it is probably about presentation and motion than anything else. Shape, size, position in the water. A good presentation where there are hungry fish of a close fly is absolutely going to work. And so I'm just trying to show there's some options for the colors on this, and I think what we'll see is that this is fairly attractive. So we'll wrap our dubbing back. We have a tight dubbing rope here and forward to create still the back of the nymph, the beginning of the adult, the shuck coming off the back. I can see a bit of that rusty olive in that right now. Now this little loop is going to be made out of CDC. I have two gray goose CDC feathers, and I'm just going to use all of it. I'm going to pull this down so the tips are together, tie it in here where my thread is at the back of the thorax area, pull that back so that the tips are in there like this. And then we need to make a decision here about how we want this fly to work. Do we want it just to float? Do we want it to sink just a little bit? A pale olive dubbing is probably a pretty good guess and bet for the thorax. So this one we're going to make, we could make it sink or swim. It's going to have a lot of motion as it is with all this stuff. So I'm just going to put a thin layer of a real pale olive dubbing, and this cream thread I'm using, kind of a tannish cream, is not going to change that color very much. And then just pull this all forward, and when I tie it in, before I tie it in, I'm going to fluff it up just a bit and tie these fibers down. There's only 3 wraps of thread, and is that a good looking wing? that looks good enough to me. It'd be very visible this way. Again, I'll show you on the next pattern. There's another way that I tie something that's very, very similar to this. And then I'm just going to pull this material back and wrap in front of it like so, even back onto it. As you can see, it's still in there. Makes it slightly more durable, make it'll stay where it's at. The material will not pull out this way if a hook gets tangled in it, something like that. And then we'll tighten our thread up there. CDC feathers will compress a bit. Now we have all this other stuff out here, and what I'm going to do is just separate out the little quill, and I'll actually just cut it parallel to that wing. It'll drop right back in. We won't really see it, but there's more CDC on there, so that will still work. This is actually a very visible pattern that floats well, but when it sinks, oftentimes, if I'm in the right position in the water, I can still see this little tuft of CDC, and when it's just under the surface, the fish will sip it in. Nice little loop wing, CDC, beaver tuft, shuck, emerger.